All right, thank you everybody for waiting. We're gonna go ahead and get started now. We will have a Q&A, um, and you can always ask questions along the way. I'll give some pauses. Why don't we go ahead and get started then? So my name is Jose. This specific webinar is going to cover API and some additional features. Although if you do have some questions about other products or the front end, I'm happy to help in those aspects as well. So why don't we go ahead with introducing myself. My name is Jose. I'm the senior sales engineer. I've been with the product for roughly over a decade. Started on support, I've done QA, I've done development work. So if you have anything that you'd like to cover, I'm happy to help. Now, we do have somebody that's helping me on the side that isn't located here. Dennis will be helping out with chats. And if you have anything to chat there, he'll be taking a look at it and addressing it, or telling me so I can address it. Now, let's go ahead and jump right in. So with using the API, the first thing that you've got to do is authenticate, and that's going to be our first step here. If you've done any kind of API work before and done any authentication, you'll find that it's straightforward. We use OAuth 2.0. What that means is it uses an API key that is generated by us, provided to you, and then use that in combination with your account. So your username and password. Now, there are specific ways to send this, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. We are going to cover some other options as well, and as we go through it. But the general idea is if you are authenticating yourself, you're using your username and password. If you're authenticating a user that you don't own, then you're going to be using what we call three-legged OAuth. And that gives you the ability to have them authorize you into our system and using that code to generate a token. Now, at the end of the day, all of these are going to generate tokens that are going to be used to send on behalf of those accounts. Now, some things to cover here. The API key can only be used in combination with username and password with the owner of that API key. So at this time, that's the method that is most secure, and that's the method that we recommend. Now, you can kind of see the code here. There are some things that are in all caps that are going to be required in order for this post to completely go through. You've got the API key, the email, and the password, and that's going to be when you're authenticating yourself. Now, when you're authenticating a secondary or a user that you don't have that information for, you're going to be using it's a URL that allows them to authorize you, which will then redirect and provide a code, and you're going to use that code in place of the username and password. You can kind of see we've changed some things here. The biggest change is going to be this grant type to being authorization code instead of grant type being password, but most of the call is the same. Now, I'll pause here for a second, see if anybody has any questions. Doesn't look like it, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. Now, we're going to cover some additional steps. We're going to go directly into the branding aspect, and that's been around for, I want to say, maybe a year or so, with a lot of customization added. You can customize like the logo, you can customize the colors that you see, and there is also the availability to remove some of the top banner portions for settings and menus. We'll cover those in a little bit, but this is pretty extensive, and it doesn't cover everything that's available, as we do release new items as time goes through. Now, in general, you'll see like what we can change here. We can change the colors. We can create the brand resources, which is going to give us the editor set of resources. There are also email brandings which we'll cover, but you can kind of see the generalization of what you can change. So we do accept colors, hexadecimal colors in order to change the colors of the branding. Um, it's pretty straightforward if you've done it before, but as far as the email branding, you can kind of customize the logo that goes through. You can customize the visible text that they see for the subject and body. You can customize the there's usually a button at the bottom that you can disable as well, customizing it that way. There's a contact center button that you can change who that contact is going to be, and then obviously the body and the footers. Now, the email customization that we just covered, what I didn't cover was the buttons and the button colors, as well as addressing the body in general. So these are going to be really helpful if you're trying to make something really white label and make it really stand out that it's from your brand. Now, let's cover a couple of options in pre-filling. We've got two different types of pre-filling, which is one, pre-filling through pre-filled text, which is more like a suggested text. This means that when the users go into sign, they will see that their fields have some information in it and be able to change it. So that's one. And then we have another one that is something we call smart fields, which will then be basic text on the document itself. This is not changeable by the signer. This is placed on the document. And that information to place it directly on the document can be done through smart fields, or it can be done through X and Y coordinates. Once we've got the smart fields set up, which this kind of walks you through that process, you can add smart fields via the front end. You can add them via the API. You can also add regular fields in both sessions. You can add them to the front end or through the API. The main purpose is for you to use them. They have to be there. Any questions here so far? I know I've kind of run through this pretty quickly. All right, perfect. So something that's going to be important as you kind of run through pre-filling and you have information submitted to you is getting that information back. Now, there's a couple things that you might want to do once you've pre-filled that data. You're going to be able to see whether it's pre-filled. You're going to be able to see what data is submitted, and you're going to be able to get notifications on when it's submitted and be able to retrieve that information. Now, retrieving it can be an array of data, or you can be downloading the document. If you've got attachments, you're going to get that as a zip file with those attachments in place. Or if you're looking for just the document, you can download just the document itself. Those downloads are always going to be PDF files. As we function, everything that you upload gets converted into PDF and then gets managed that way. Any questions here so far? Okay, perfect. So moving forward, we've got webhooks, which is really useful in a sense that if you want to be updating internal and external systems, especially if you're keeping track of statuses internally so that people can view them on your created dashboards. So that's what's going to be really valuable here. The webhooks can be used also as the notification to download or retrieve data that's been submitted. What I see the two most common scenarios is when that data is submitted, a document is downloaded, stored on your servers, and then if you have data that needs to be updated that is viewable within your application, that's when that data is downloaded and placed in the appropriate locations. Now, the webhooks themselves, the setup can be one of two ways. You can set up things on the document or document group level. That means just to those specific instances, or you can set it up on the user level. So user.document, so all user documents, or user.document group, that's all the document groups in that user account. And that will trigger these notifications to go out. And then finally, if you wanted to add an extra layer of security, you can add what's called HMAC, which is basically a secret that you're adding to it to identify that this payload is coming from somewhere secure. Any questions here? Perfect. Now, this is just a little bonus that I like to cover. As people use the application over time, it really just lands in your main folder and it just kind of stays there. But over time, that can be difficult to find what you're looking for. So we do suggest getting comfortable with moving the documents around. And this means that you'll be able to create folders, create subfolders, and move them into those folders programmatically. You can also do it manually and archive, by date. So pretty straightforward, just another way to get those copies, move those documents around to make everything cleaner. And now just to cover some important resources as we kind of work through the entire process. You can always email support. We got support at signNow. Great resource. Also, they can help if they don't have an answer. They will refer to an API specialist or recommend that you set up a meeting with myself or some of the API team to get some answers and find out what you're looking for. And that way we can send you on the right way. Now, the most common place to get started as far as API goes when you're doing development and the best resource is going to be the API documentation. The documentation itself is pretty extensive. If you haven't seen it before, I definitely recommend taking a look at it, as well as going through the guides. Now, the guides are not the most comprehensive, since that it doesn't cover everything. However, it does cover those specific processes, and it will give you a great starting point. And then finally, we have API Sandbox, which is creating an account and being able to create API keys to be able to consume going forward when you're doing your application testing. Perfect. Now we've got our Q&A session here. I know I did run through it kind of quickly, providing some anecdotes there, but if you have any questions, now's the time to kind of put them in the chat. Okay, perfect. I'm going to assume that everybody is now prepared to start their process with the API and you've got all the resources needed. Thank you for joining me today and have a nice day.